Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Nun Ches. In Avodah Zarah, we live for Achenim Kol Basis Ron Son Basar Shivya. We're up to Amar Rava, 8 lines down on the page. Amar Rava Ki Asoy LePamtisa. When I came to Pampadisa, Ikban Nachmani Shmaita Masnisa. Nachmani, who was Abaya's family name, surname, he beat me, overwhelmed me with cheatings and even a brisa. The Osir, right? That the discussion we were having about is really Osir. What was the case? That there was a story that happened where a guy came into a store and he said, "You guys have any wine to sell?" And they told him, "No, there's no wine here." So there was a bucket of wine on the floor, and the guy put his hand in there and stirred it. And he says, "Isn't this wine?" So the storekeeper got so upset that he took the wine that the guy had stirred in the bucket and he threw it into a big barrel. Rava said, "You're allowed to sell the barrel." Rava said, "You're allowed to sell the barrel to a guy," meaning you can have enough from it, even though technically there might be yayin nesach inside. Rav Huna bar China, the two Rav Hunas disagreed from afar, and they disagreed with him. However, as we'll see on today's daf, Abaya overwhelmed Rava with proofs that when the guy suspected there was wine in there and he stirred it, you have to assume that there's yayin nesach in there. You can't have enough from it. So, and therefore, Rav Huna and the two Rav Hunas, their argument stood. Then later on, one of the Rav Hunas, Rav Huna Brave Nachman, came to Mechusa, Rava's town, and Rava knew that he was going to overpower him with arguments. So he said, so when Rav Huna came, he said, "What's the halacha?" He said, "Oh, it's osir." He says, "Didn't you say it's mutter? You said that it's mutter." He says, "No, I only said that I didn't say that you're allowed to have enough from it directly. You have to sell it excluding the value of the wine that was stirred." That's what he said. That's not really what he had paskin, though. He had paskin that it's mutter. Rashi says he just said this because he was embarrassed. He was macho the whole thing. Because he said basically that when a guy stirred it, he had no intention to stir for avodas or for nisuch, because he didn't even know for sure that it was wine. So that was what Rava maintained. However, Rava was overpowered by the arguments of Abaya. What's the story that we see now? So Rava says in our Gemara, but when I came to Masnisa, he overpowered me. He overwhelmed me with arguments, both teachings, regular shmaita, like a teaching in the Gemara, and even a brisa, the usher. What's the shmaita? What was the story? There was a story. There was this case, there was a case in Arda, Shmuel's town, but usher Shmuel. And Shmuel forbade the same kind of a thing, where a guy came in and stirred the wine, and he may have thought that it was wine. But Tveria, another story like that in Tveria, Shmuel was in Arda, in Bavel. So one story like that in Arda where Shmuel assered it, and there was a story in Eretz Yisrael in Tveria, but Aser Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan, who was the Mard Aser, so he assered it. Ba'amilei, and they told him, Ba'amilei, and I told him, in other words, Abaya told me this story. He says the same case happened in Arda and in Tveria, and the rabbis there, the Mard Asers, both asered it. Amilei, and I told him, no, Lefishem Beit Torah. No, in Arda and Tveria, they asered it because the people were not that well learned. And you're afraid that if you would have allowed them to drink that wine, they'll come to drink real yayin nesach. So it's only because of that. But Amrli, he told me, Tferi and Arda ain't b'nei Torah, the Mechusa b'nei Torah. You're telling me Tferi and Arda are not b'nei Torah, and in your town they are b'nei Torah, and that's why you allowed it. So that was one argument that I didn't win. Masnisa, where did he overpower me? The brisa? Da agardamim, da agardamim for that. Dalit is not like the case or that case, but rather that's the whole word. Da agardamim is a market inspector. In other words, like he comes from the bureaus of weights and measures to make sure that the scales are proper, that you're not cheating. The volume, the scales, and the receptacles, the measuring cups, etc., are valid. So there was a guy. He was a guy. A guy to come. Shekarach b'meinekas. What he was, he pierced with a tube into the barrel to check it. I guess to check it. The hella, and he brought up some wine from the barrel. He was checking it, let's say, for weights and measures and things of that sort. But he took some wine out of there via the tube. Oh, shatom in a kos, or he actually tasted a little bit from a cup. Then he put it back in the barrel. We weren't concerned so much about hygiene, I guess, but about putting the neinach back. Zaya Maisa, that was the story of Basru, and they forbade it. My la bana, isn't it? So Abai said, you see that it's also bahana. When a guy touched the wine and he could have been menasachet for avodah zarah, put it back in. They asked it bana. So Rava's first answer was low, b'shtia. Remember we said there's different stages. Do you ask it bahana, you can't have ayana, or do you allow you to have ayana? You could sell it, for example, except for you could have ayana, you could sell it, just can't drink it. So he says, no, maybe they asked it only for drinking. For drinking, you can't drink from it, but maybe you could have ayana. So yachi less than yimacher. If it would have said, if the lashon was that you could have you could only like Rava's maintaining, you can't drink it. Even Rava said you can't drink it, but you could have enough from it, you could sell it. Yachi less than yimacher. So just say sell it. Sell it as if you could have enough from it, you just can't drink it. So he should have said sell it. He wouldn't have said aser. Aser means aser anah. Kediktani sefer, like the sefer of that brisa says. There's another case there. Charam Avikrabim, who was a real crook. Rashi says Charam is a mashuga. Ubam Rivas, he argues, he confiscates things, he just grabs things. Mahar Las Shlopkon, he does whatever he wants. There was a story there. Shoshi Elachavas, he put his hand into a barrel of wine. Uksavar Shel Shemen. There, this Charam, this wicked person, thought it was oil. And then it turned out it was wine, but he thought it was oil. Now, oil, there's no issue of nisach. They don't menasach that for avodah zarah, only wine. They only use libations. They learned from the Jews, right? V'nimsa shel yayin, zeha yamaisa. This is a story for Amru Yam Yimacher. You could sell it. In other words, you could have enough from it. You can't drink it, but you could have enough from it. So when you could have enough, but you can't drink it, the lashon is Yimacher. Sell it, not that it's usher. Usher sounds like it's totally usher. Tifta Rava Tifta. Therefore, it's a kasha on Rava. Rava who said what? That you're allowed to sell it, right? Rava said you're allowed to sell it, have enough from here. You see, then when a guy touched the wine, and he knew it was wine. When he knew it was wine, he said, isn't this wine over here? When he thinks wine, you can't have enough from it because it's yayin nesach. You can't have enough from it at all. So therefore, Rava was, so to speak, upgeschlug. Now Rashi points out over here in the white lines in Rashi halfway down, and we're going to pass the Shimon Leal in a couple of days. So I'm going to come on. If a Jew put it back in, so then you could sell. You just can't have enough from the yayin nesach. So if let's say you have 10 gallons of regular wine and you mixed in 1 gallon of wine which a guy touched, so sell all 11 gallons for the price of 10 gallons, and you're not having any enough from it. You certainly can't drink it, but you're allowed to sell for that. That's if a Jew put it back in. But if you had a guy really touch the wine, and even if the guy, now in the case that Rava was dealing with, he was dealing with a case where the Jew in anger, the storekeeper, threw it back in. So it's not clear over here. They said you can't have enough from it at all. So what do we say here? He says we're going to pass like Shemulil. Come on, this if a Jew put it back in. Wasn't this the Jew who put it back in? So that's not so clear that we don't pass like it. So he said tifta Rava tifta, but it's you should sell it. But do we really paskin not like Rava? Usually we paskin like Rava in cases. We'll see about that later on the next few days when we come to a final conclusion. Story Rabbi Yochanan Arza of Rabbi Yossi ben Aroy. These two rabbis have a yasvi. They were sitting with kashasu chama. They were sitting and drinking some wine. Asahu Gavra, a man came nearby. Amulay, they thought he was Jewish. Amulay, they said, listen, do us a favor, Tashkinan. Why don't you come and pour for us? Where the rabbis are sitting here, would you come please and pour for us wine? No, it's not simply like taking a bottle of wine. Why can't you pour it yourself? You had to, draw it from the barrel, etc., etc. Do us a favor. Can you serve us the wine? The Basar Ramakasa, after the guy poured the wine into their cup, he gloy milsav v'chavmu. Turned out he was a guy. They thought he was a Jew. He looked Jewish, whatever. That turned out he was a guy. What do? Chad asar afil. One of these two rabbis, you have Rabbi Yochanan Arza and Rabbi Yossi ben Aroy. One of them said you're allowed you can't even have enough from it because the guy touched the wine or stirred the wine. Can't even have enough. The chad shari afilu b'shtiya. And one said you can even drink it. You can even drink it. So there's these are like extremes, right? One, you can't have any anah, and there's an in between stage where you could have anah but you can't drink it. And then there's the most kuladika stage, the most lenient stage is you can even drink it. So these two rabbis disagreed. Now it turns out he was a guy. Now the two rabbis disagreed. One went in one direction, extreme, you can't even have an oil. One went the other extreme, you can even drink it. What's their svaras? What was the reason for these two rabbis' opinions? Amar Shubalevi, Man da'asar shaper asar. The one who forbade it, he had a good reason for it. Man da'shari shaper shari. Now we're talking about the same case, right? But their two rabbis disagreed, and they both had good reasons. Now Man da'asar, the one who forbade it, Meimar Amar, he figured like this. He says like this. He figured like this. Meimar Amar, the guy, he says, what's the problem? That the guy might have stirred it for Avodah Zarah, might have been Yain Nesach. He says, listen, the guy for sure, Meimar Amar, Sal Kedaitet Rabbanan Kihani Shechra Kashasu. The guy's figuring, what are these two rabbis drinking? What's in your cups? Do you think that they could be drinking beer? Rabbis don't drink beer so much. There wasn't custom to drink beer. First of all, they had date beer, whatever. They don't drink beer so much. They drink wine, right? So what are they drinking? They're not drinking beer. If it would be beer, there's no problem. But you think they're drinking beer? No. They're certainly they're definitely drinking beer. So when he asked me to serve him the beer, I had the opportunity to stir the wine for Yain Nesach. Menasachet is menasachet. Therefore, you can't have any enough from it at all, right? Man Deshari, the one who said that you're allowed to drink it, you're allowed to even drink it, not just have enough, but you can even drink it. Shaper Shar, he also had a good reason for it. Why? Meimar, he figures the guy's saying to himself like this: is it possible that these rabbis are drinking wine? Would they tell me a guy? He wasn't disguised. They just thought he was a Jew. Turned out he was a guy. He says, these rabbis, they know they don't like us. We know they don't like us to touch their wine because he turned into Yain Nesach. So if these two rabbis were drinking wine, is it possible they would have asked me to serve them the wine? It's impossible. It's definitely beer. Kashasu. Therefore, there was no reason for the stir it. No, there was no reason to asr it because goyim don't stir wine, they don't stir beer for Avodah Zarah. So therefore, you could even drink it. Because in other words, even though the guy touched the wine, as we'll see, or poured it at least, had some contact with it, they know for sure that he wouldn't have been menasach it. You see, the concern always is we have stam yenim. You don't know if they were menasach. If you know that it says that they were menasach the wine for Avodah Zarah, it's definitely asur b'hanoi. Not asur b'hanoi, you got to destroy it. The halach is you have to destroy it. You have to get rid of it, throw it out. Not just you can't just leave it around. That's if it's definitely yain nesach. All the cases we're talking about here is where we're not sure, right? Not sure. So he had contact with the wine. So therefore, is it? So in this case, one of the rabbis said you're allowed to because the guy for sure felt, he estimated that he appraised the guy and he said the guy for sure realized that would have thought that it's beer because he knows we're rabbis. If we're drinking wine, would we have asked him to pour the wine for us? LMI must have been beer. That's what the guy is figuring. Therefore, he wasn't menasach and therefore you're allowed to drink it. So the question is, what do you mean? They were really drinking wine. How could this rabbi who was matur think that the guy's thinking that it's beer? Why? They're drinking wine. Can't you see it's wine? So the Gemara's Vaka Chazi, they can see that it's wine. Doesn't look, wine and beer don't look alike. It says Belial, it was at night. Couldn't see what they were drinking. They could smell it. Wine smells like wine. It says Bacharata, it's new wine. It hasn't been aged yet, it doesn't have a smell. But he touched it. After all, he was serving it. He had to dip the ladle into the barrel or whatever, however he served it. He says, he touched the natla, right? The natla, which was like the serving spoon or dish or ladle, whatever. Somebody said that natla, what do we call the natla? The thing that we make the tilas yadayim with because of the tilas yadayim. Maybe it comes from there. Anyway, okay, so he touched it with his spoon or whatever, and he touched it, even though he didn't have kavana. It still should be usher. How could you say you're allowed to drink it? The Gemara, he poured it. He poured it as he had a big jug. Let's say it wasn't a gigantic barrel. We think of a barrel as too big to pick up. He had a jug there, and he poured it without touching. And now, again, the one who's mantra says the guy is definitely thinking that it's beer, and it came from his power. Right? It was his power that did it because he poured it, but he didn't come in contact with the with the beer or the wine directly. The rabbis were not gozer there. That's considered either like a milsa shchicha. They didn't go that far. Rashi says, you're not even allowed to drink it. So we have here these different opinions about the very same case, right? The very same case. The guy did it without kavana. But of course, the rabbi who answered it figured that the guy knew it had kavana because the guy said the rabbis aren't drinking beer, must be drinking wine. So he's menasa, it's also even behind all. Now in both these cases, you don't know for sure it's yain nesa. It's for sure yain nesa. You have to destroy it, like avodah zarah. Boy minei Ravasi Rav Yochanan. Ravasi says kasha yain shemascho avukachavamau. Let's say a guy. Now again, Kurt brought up the other day that the real wine was undiluted, and that was the wine that they used for libations. What happens if a guy came over to you and you wanted to drink some wine and you have the undiluted wine? You have to mix it with either 2 or 3 parts water to the wine. What happens if the guy mixed it for you? Muscho, like mixed it up for you. Amalei the aim of musgo. Why don't you speak the normal tongue? The way we call mixing wine to drink it is musgo. You mixed it. You stirred it with 2, 3 parts water to make it drinkable. Why don't you use that lashon? Amalei, I got the lashon of Moscho, like from the pasuk. It says in Mishlei, Tavcha, she slaughtered her animals. Moscha yena, she mixed her wine. Right, so that's in the lashon of the mikra. Mixing wine with water, diluting it is lashon of Moscha. Amalei lashon Torah latzma, lashon chamatzma. That's the Torah's lashon, but we speak in a different lashon. If you ask me a shaila, speak clearly. The clear question is, if a guy mixed the wine, diluted the wine for me, Mike. Amalei osir. He said it's osir. Not because it's really yayin nesach. Is it really yayin nesach? He was mixing just the opposite. You might say that a guy doesn't use mixed diluted water for avodah zarah for nisach, right? He uses undiluted wine, but he says, you know why it's usher? You shouldn't drink it. Mishum lech amr nazir, that famous lashon. We tell the nazir, go, schor, go around lekarma losikrav, go around. In other words, we tell the nazir's not allowed to drink wine or any wine products. Besides that, he can't become tummy mace and he can't shave or anything like that. He can't cut his hair. The key is that nazir can't drink wine. But we tell a nazir, don't even approach the vineyard. Don't even approach there. Don't even go near there. Don't tempt yourself. That's a person should always be careful. Don't even go near there, right? Like don't even look at things you shouldn't look at. Don't go near those places. You might come to do an avera. So here also he says basically probably this cannot be yayin nesach because he's diluting it with water. And maybe with water, that's not yayin nesach. But you know what? He mixed something for you. The guy mixed it. Don't have him mix anything for you because one day you'll have him mix regular undiluted wine and that'll be yayin nesach. So it's xera. Don't do it. Other than xera. That was one answer. So now we're going to see other cases like that. Rav Meir Ikla L'Sabsa. He went to that place. He saw wine that had been diluted by goyim. The Ishti Yisroel, and the Jews drank from it. But Asalu, he forbade it, just like we said in the previous case. Mishum lech am nazir. We tell the nazir, go around, schor, surround, go around the vineyard. Like I'm if don't go near. It and I'm Rav Yochanan. We see send Rav Yochanan said, Rav Yochanan, yain shemasko of gechavim. Yain that was mixed, that was diluted by a guy. Aser mishum. That reason, again, it's not aser because it's not really yain nesach, right? Even though that's just mishum lech amr nazir schor the kamal of don't go near there. Before we get to the next story, take a look on Rashi Divrei Maschil Aser, right about a little bit above where we are now. Aser afagat l'noga, even though he didn't touch the wine, gazra b'ana mekochel aser b'shtia. Right, even in that case, we just said before that kocho shelo b'kavana is even mutter to drink. That was a svara. But over here, afagat l'noga b'ana mekochel aser b'shtia mishum achaka saver. But here, the guy knew there was wine there. See, it's one thing to be matir. Everybody says you could be mutter. Why was as far as the rabbi before who said it was mutter to drink the wine? Because the guy didn't touch it and he thought it was beer. But when there's a svara to say that he knew that it was wine, you have to be machmir. So that's what Rashi says here. Asr afagam to naga gazra b'ana mekochola asr b'shtia mishum achaka savera, to stay away from the vera. Aval ba'anov v'aday lo mitzer. In these cases where he said where the guy mixed the wine for you. And he didn't touch the wine at all. So there's no question about stirring. You could certainly have enough from it. The law of it's no different than if you touched it through, like the lulav. Rav says you're allowed to have. I remember the case: the guy came down from the tree. He took a branch off the tree. When he came down, the branch, the palm branch, dipped into the wine. He didn't touch it. So in a case like that, you could certainly have enough from it, even if you can't drink. You remember that there's levels, right? You can't drink it. That's one thing. That's like a middle drink, but you could have enough. Can't have enough. That's more chumradik. The most cool thing is you could even drink it. So he said when he didn't touch it at all and he thought it was beer, then there's no reason to be machmir. You could even drink it. But in these cases where the guy knew that it was wine, you have to be concerned you can't drink it. But if he didn't touch the wine, he didn't touch it at all. What did he do? He just or he prepared mixed wine. He diluted it. In that case, they don't use it for yayin nesach. Then you're allowed to have an oil. You just can't drink it. That's what he says here. Also, right? That case of yain shemizchav v'chavim, you could certainly have enough from it. It's no worse than lo adaf minigia idei davar acher. And here too, the guy mixed it for you. He certainly was not menasach it, so you could have enough from it. You just can't drink it. Now another story. Rish Lakish, 5 lines from the bottom of the page, or 6 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Rish Lakish ikra leBatzra. He went to Batzra. Batzra was a town, right? Today we have a town in Iraq by Basra, right? It's a famous town, right? A lot of conflicts took place there. So he went to Batzra. Chazi Yisrael, he saw Yisrael the Kochabe. He saw Jews eating fruits to lo maser. They didn't take meiser. In other words, they didn't take meiser. And ba'asr lahu. Now Rish Lakish forbade them from eating those fruits meiser because Rish Lakish assumed that Batzra is the city of Betzer Bamidbar, which is an Ever Yarden, which is we just had in last week's Pasha as Betzer Bamidbar Be'eretz Mishal Ruvaini. It's one of the Orei Miklat, one of the 6 Orei Miklat. There were 3 Orei Miklat in Eretz Yisrael, 3 in Ever Yarden, and that was one of them. He thought that was part of Eretz Yisrael. He also saw Chazamai the Sagdi Lahu. He saw that they were also bowing down to a pool of water of the Chavna. He saw them bowing down. B'shas Yisrael and Yisrael, Jews were drinking from that water. Also, and he forbade that as well. That's what Rish Lakish did. He was machmer in 2 cases. Number 1 about Meiser in Batzra, and number 2 about water that was worshipped, or they bowed down to that water, and Jews were drinking, and he said that's forbidden. Also, came to Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish joined Rabbi Yochanan, his brother-in-law, and he told him these 2 stories. While your coat is still on you, in other words, stop what you're doing. Zil Hadar, go retract those 2 opinions. Go be matter the payers for eating too much mice and sing them out to the water. Why? Betzer life on a Batzra. Betzer is the city in Aveli Yarden, which is one of the Orei Miklat. That is considered Eretz Yisrael. Interesting. Rashi says, keeping them Eretz Yisrael, he chayav a payers for meiser. It's considered Eretz Yisrael, even though in Aveli Yarden, Transjordan, it's on the other side, and that's where Ruvain and Gad and Chatzir Menashe wanted to have that was considered Eretz Yisrael. He says that's Eretz Yisrael, just like Asa is Eretz Yisrael. But so he says Betzer is not Batzra. Batzra was like a town in Iraq or someplace else, or maybe another place by that city. That's not Eretz Yisrael, so they don't have to take too much meises there. Umayim sharabim eina nasarim. And also, if they bow down to a pool of water, whether it's a river or an ocean or even a big swimming pool or a pond that belongs to the public, they can't answer that. It's like bowing down to the mountain. They can't answer the mountain. Therefore, the Jews could drink from that water. Why? Rabbi Yochanan, who told Rish Lakish to retract his opinion, his stringent opinion, he told him to retract. Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his Sfarad. Rabbi Yochanan Shimon Yosadak, Mayim Sharabim Ein Asarim. You can't forbid water of the tzibur. It belongs to the tzibur. You can't forbid it. It's just like doesn't belong to them. Doesn't belong to them. They can't forbid it. Bowing down. Now remember, we've had different klolim where you can't. If somebody bows down to my cow, they can't forbid it. But if they do some action on it, then they could forbid it. They have to pay me, right? But they could forbid it. So here too, just bowing down doesn't ruin it. What do you mean? If it belonged to an individual, it would be usher. It's attached to the ground. Water is a pond or whatever, an ocean, river, whatever. There's water's like attached to the ground. And And therefore, if it's mechuber, it's attached to the ground, they can't forbid it even if it belonged to an individual. Let's say Yankel owned the mountain. You said before, the goyim bowed down to the mountain, they can't forbid the mountain. They can forbid various accessories that are on the mountain, that they, chairs and kneeling stools.
Things that are movable.
Things that are movable, but not things on the ground. So here, even if it belonged to an individual, it shouldn't be also because it's attached to the ground. So let's read the Tashinu Gola. A wave came and took the water off the water and moved it onto the ground. So it was no longer attached to the pond or to the river or the ocean, whatever. That at the end of the day, even if it was detached from the river, but Avnei Harshin Adolon, it's like the case we had before. We had a machlokas before between Rav Yochanan and Bnei Rav Chia. What happens if the stones of a mountain became dislodged, right? It fell apart, it broke off by itself. The machlokas, whether it's us or mutter. Now, Rabbi Yochanan says over here that it's mutter because it belongs to the tzibur, it's a rabbin. But if it's an individual, it would be mutter. If it would be mutter, if it would be an individual, it would be usher because it's detached. But isn't it considered attached? No, it was detached. Yeah, but we had that shal before. If it became detached by itself, it's an usher mutter. Now you're saying Rabbi Yochanan would say in that case would be usher. So to stand Rabbi Yochanan and the Amar Asuras. So in the machlokas before between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Chia, when stones of a mountain became dislodged by themselves, or the usher mutter, we had machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Chia, but we're not sure who said what. Here you see Rabbi Yochanan would say that it's usher because he says the reason that it's mutter over here is because it belongs to the tzibur. But if it wouldn't belong to the tzibur, it would be usher, even though it's like the stones of a mountain that became dislodged by themselves, right? Says the Lord Shricha, that's not you can't prove from there. The tafchinu biyodei, here it's speaking about not Rav Chia, but Bnei Rav Chia. The machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Bnei Rav Chia, right? But here we could be speaking about where it didn't become dislodged by a wave of water by itself, like spontaneously, but rather the guy took the water out of the pond. So in a case like that, if a guy removed water from the pond, the reason why it's not usher, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who admonished Rish Lakish and said, no, go be matur, is because it belongs to the tzibur, not because it's part of the ground, because you could say it was detached by the guy, and you can't prove to the question of who said what when it comes to if the stones of a mountain or water of an ocean became dislodged of its own spontaneously, what the halach is, because here it could be speaking about where the guy dislodged it himself. Another story on tomorrow's daf. Chibaraba ikla legavla. In case you fall asleep now, this will all be on the podcast tomorrow. So Chibaraba ikla legavla. Reb Chia Baraba went to that place Gavla. He saw Jewish girls who got married to Goyim. They weren't really 100% Goyim. They were Goyim halachically, but they at least were circumcised, right? They were circumcised. They were in the process of becoming Jewish. Okay, so he saw Jewish girls who became pregnant from these guys who technically were still Goyim, and that was one thing that he saw. In other words, Jewish girls, he went to that city, he said the girls couldn't find men to marry. Happened in a lot of cities around the world over the years where Jewish girls were brought up in a home. They couldn't find any nice Jewish boys. So they accepted Goyim who were in the process. That was one thing that Rav Chia Baraba saw. Another thing he saw, he saw wine that had been diluted by Goyim. The Shas Yisrael and Jews drank it. So what's going on over here? Okay, that was the second thing that he saw. Chaza Turmusa, the Shalkul of Kam, he saw lupins or lupines, kind of it's a bitter herb, bitter vegetable that was cooked by Goyim. Now, what was the problem if it was cooked by Goyim? That doesn't need shchit or anything like that. It's a vegetable, but it's a problem of bishul Goyim, bishul akum. Okay. So Chaza Turmusa, the Shalkul of Kam, Bachal Yisrael, and the Jews ate it. Below Amar, below Midi. He didn't say anything. He saw these three crimes that Jewish girls were marrying Goyim who had Mila only, and he saw Jews drinking wine diluted by the Goyim, and he saw Jews eating vegetables that had been cooked by Goyim. And he didn't say anything. Also came Rabbi Yochanan, and he asked Rabbi Yochanan, what should I do? Amalei, say v'hachros al b'neim shem mamzerim. Go announce that the children from those marriages are mamzerim. Now we'll see, why are they mamzerim? You should be asking a question, why are they mamzerim? Why, Michael? Why are you asking? Why should it be mamzer?
It's a mikveh Torah. The women are mikveh Torah.
That's right. The Jews are. In other words, he's a goy mamzer. We'll see. This is not the halacha. So Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, we had this in Yavamas. So number one, go announce that the kids are mamzer. Number two, val yenim shum yain nesach. Tell them that their wine is yain nesach. Val turmusa mishum bishulav yechavim, and announce that their vegetables that were cooked by the goyim is bishulav yechavim. It's all usher. Mishum she'enim b'nei Torah. Listen to this, because they're not b'nei Torah. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean? Because these Jewish people were not b'nei Torah. And this is only going on the last case. Why did he say that bishulav yechavim is mishum she'enim b'nei Torah? Meaning they're not really well versed. So we'll see what this really means. I'll get ahead of it. I'll say what he really means is this: it's not really bishulav yechavim, but they're not well versed in halachas. They're not b'nei Torah. And if I allow them to eat this cooked dish, they'll eat other cooked dishes that Goyim makes, which is real bishulav yechavim. We're not talking about treif. It could have ashgacha. There could be a rabbi, a mashgiach there, but you can't. A goy is not allowed to cook your food, even if it's kosher. So in this case, we'll see she'ein b'nei Torah, because what's mean she'ein b'nei Torah? The Gemara is going to say, what do you mean they're not b'nei Torah? And if they are b'nei Torah, it's mutter to eat the bishul. The answer is I'm expanding the rules of bishul goy to apply even over here. Why? Because if I allow them here, they'll do other things. If they were b'nei Torah, they could understand the difference between this bishul and another bishul. We'll come explain that in a minute. But let's first we'll take them in order. Number one, Al B'nai Shem, we're the first of the Y lines in the Gemara and then Testament Al. Al B'nai Shem Mamzeirim announced that their children are Mamzeirim. Rabbi Yochanan Tameid and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said two things. Number one, Lola Menager Achim Novotitl, like we said before. We all agree with that. You're not a full ger, you're not become a Jew until you had Mila and Tefillah and Bisman Beis Migdash, a carbon, right? You're not. So they only had Mila here. They're still a goy. Bekivin the low tafel, since they didn't have immersion in the mikveh, the shame Yehudi to be a Jew, even though trouble of Gechavmu. Another thing Rabbi Yochanan said, we had this in Yavamas. Oh, become Ever Abba Israel Vlad Mamzer. The kid is a mamzer, not like we hold. We hold that Avkam Abba Bas Israel, the child is goes like you say, mikveh Tara, she's the girl, she's a Jew. A mamzer is only if you, in other words, a mixture of a goy with a Jew does not create a mamzer lahalacha. Rabbi Yochanan held that it was. It's Gemara in Yavamas Ram Mem Zayin Mem Ches Mem Tes that is considered a mamzer. We don't hold that way. A mamzer we hold is only if a Jewish woman, let's say, if a man had bia with a Jewish woman who he wasn't allowed to marry on punishment of Kores, that makes a mamzer. Otherwise, not. Not like Rabbi Kiva holds. Even a Loza say makes a mamzer. Anyway, so he also the gamzer. So that's number one. Rabbi Yochanan said announced that the kids are mamzer. Not really mamzer. He doesn't condone the marriage, right? It's still a goy, but not a mamzer. Number two, val yainam mishum yayin nesach. Go and ask nesach mishum. Is it really yayin nesach? They diluted it again. I think the reason why when the goy diluted the wine for you, there's really not avodah zarah. It's really not yayin nesach. It's because they're not menasach that kind of wine, diluted wine. They're only menasach for their libation. They take undiluted wine. So he says, why is it nesach? Mishum, the same thing we said before in Amid Beis. Lech amrazu. We told them his dozer go around. Schor go around the karma. Lo tekarv. Don't go near the karma. In other words, we want you to stay away from any wine, even though there's no concern. It's really not yayin nesach when he diluted it for you. But don't get involved with the goy wine. Don't get into particulars. It's too complicated. You'll make mistakes. Don't go near it. Don't touch any wine. And begozer that these lupins, this vegetable that they've cooked is awesome shalav kachavim Torah, because they're not b'nei Torah. They're not learned. The Gemara says time of day b'nei Torah. What the reasons? Because they're not b'nei Torah. Hope b'nei Torah, sure. But if they would be learned, you're allowed to. How are you allowed to eat bishul? A person who's a ben Torah certainly should not eat bishulakum. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amarav kol shenechol kamoshu chai. If something is eaten raw, ain't b'mishum bishul. In other words, bishul. What is bishulakum? The rabbis make zera. We don't want you to get near. Don't mix with the with the goyim. You'll come to marry them. You'll come to do avodah zarah with them, etc. But anything that's eaten raw, an apple. Right, you take an apple or a carrot, you can eat it raw, so you're not going to come to mix with them. Mixing them is when you sit down and you cook and you have a meal together, etc. So over here it says, why do you say that it's only usher because they're not b'nei Torah? But if it were b'nei Torah, it would be mutter. But over here, this is not eaten raw. These lupins are very bitter. and unless you cook them, you can't eat them. So therefore, it should be usher even for a ben Torah. Why do you say it's usher? Because they're not b'nei Torah. If they're b'nei Torah, it should be usher too. So the answer is Rabbi Yochanan ki achlish nesfirle. He holds like the other exception. There's two exceptions to the rules of bishul akum. Number one, if it's eaten raw, there's no bishul akum. Even if you cooked it, but if it could be eaten raw, there's no issue. And also, if it's a food that it has to be a food that you would serve to a king. If it's a simple food, I don't know, maybe a falafel or something like that, or French fries, something that you wouldn't serve to a king. It wouldn't be used as on the king's table as a relish, as accompanying his dinner. There's no way to serve bishul akum there. Anything that you wouldn't serve to a king, to relish his bread, there's no bishul akum. Therefore, in this case, you wouldn't serve these lupins to a king, and therefore there's really no bishul akum there. But why do I say it's osir? Time it in because they're not b'nei Torah, so they can't differentiate between them, right? B'nei Torah, but if they would be b'nei Torah, they would be allowed to eat it, because b'nei Torah would understand that since this stuff is not served to a king, there's no issur of bishul akum there. So technically, 2 out of these 3 isurim that Rabbi Yochanan said are really only gzeiros. He says, only because they're not b'nei Torah, tell them to stay away from the wine that the guy diluted, but it's not really yain esach. The first thing that he said, though, he was very machmer. He held that the kids are mamzerim. Also, they're not really mamzerim lahalacha, because we don't paskin that way. All right, tomorrow's daf is daf nun test. Most of it will be on the podcast. I mean, even from the top of the page will be on the podcast. And on Sunday, Mirz Hashem, we will start on Daf Samach. On Daf Samach, a few lines from the top of the page is a break. I think it's Amar Papa. We start there on Sunday morning, Mirz Hashem. Shabbat Shalom L'kulam.
Shalom, regards to everybody. Take care.
Welcome back, Mickey.
Thanks.